But my move tonight is the province of Ontario, and I want to give them tremendous thanks for all the support they're giving us for this event, helping come up with the idea, which I think is a really interesting idea, since New York and Toronto are similar but different. We all know things about very close, and the same language, but how different we are. And so that makes it more, and there's tremendous technology scenes or tech startup scenes going on in both. So, with thanks to Ontario, I want to introduce, and I love the title here. This is Jens Michael Schall, and just take a breath.
No.
Council Economic Affairs Ontario, close parens, Ontario International New York Trade and Investment Office.
It's government after all, I'm on. It's government after all, as I said. Thanks so much, David, and thanks so much to the entire NYPAY team for bringing us on board to partner with you on this event. I hope it's just the beginning and the first of many events to come in the future, and the way it looks tonight, I'm sure it is the beginning. So thanks so much. So good evening, everyone. So thanks so much for being here. I'm always amazed to see so many people come out on the evening after putting in a full workday. So I'm excited, and I promise I will keep it very short because those are the folks that are really important here tonight. So I was allocated 45 minutes.
I looked down and he had this bullet point. I was like,
So my name is Jens Michael Schall. I'm with the Government of Ontario. We are co-located here at Canada's Consulate up in Midtown. Our office, in very brief, we have two mandates, if you will. One is to help Ontario companies being successful here in New York, and a few of the Ontario companies are here, and I see a few of you. And our other mandate is to help US companies be successful in Toronto, in Ontario. Basically, what we try to do is we try to connect the two ecosystems here in New York and in Toronto. We do that by supporting events just like this one. So that's really what we are all about. And I mean, New York, of course, has a lot going for it, and from a tech and startup perspective. Mostly, I think about the much deeper pockets of the VC community here in New York versus Toronto. But on the other hand, Toronto also has a lot going for it, and I think mainly about talent. And talent is something that's particularly in the tech sector becoming more and more important. Tech talent is, in Ontario, either homegrown. The province of Ontario produces every year 50,000 or 40,000 as of now. Standard is, and will increase that in the next 5 years to 50,000. But talent is also, coming from abroad. And I mean, we have, we are in a fortunate position to have tools available to attract and retain talent. That adds to our ecosystem, and that's something that I guess is our strong point these days. I don't want to take more time. I really want to have and hear from you. But before I give it back to you, Dave, for a minute, I just want to point out a few folks in the room that are working with the consulate or with my office. So from the Ontario team, we have Aaron Hindle over there, standing there. Hi. From the Canadian consulate, we have Cyril Joseph, who is leading Canada's immigration program here in New York, and we have Natalie Minova, who is managing Canada's investment team out of the consulate. So with that said, I'll leave it to you to take over. Enjoy the evening and have fun, have drinks, have food.
So I think that's a great example. Both our cities, both Toronto and New York, are immigrant cities. And here's a great example here. It's a guy who's born in Germany, now Canadian citizen, married to a Quebecois, so right there you got at least 3 languages. And this is something that I think will come into play during the discussion. So, without further ado, I just wanted to say, rather than trying to give bios to you folks, I'll let them talk to themselves. So we'll walk through each of the 4 individuals up here. They've self-sorted themselves by Toronto on one side, and then we move over towards, I guess, the south is the U.S. So, let's try to get this right. So, Dave Nugent, Head of Investment for Wealthsimple, and David, just do your little thing. Who are you?
Sure. Dave Nugent from Wealthsimple. I'm the co-founder and head of investments. We are a robo-advisor based in Toronto. We actually launched in New York last year, so I've got the tail from both sides of the border. And I actually just recently launched in the UK in September. Predominantly focused on millennial investors. We've got about 60,000 clients now, predominantly in Canada. And we kind of aim to make investing accessible to everyone.
Jeff Hindle, Managing Director of FinTech and Commerce, not quite as long as again. Managing Director of FinTech and Commerce, Mars Discovery District. Did it?
I can work on making that longer.
Yeah.
I'm Jeff Hindle from Mars in Toronto. Mars is the world's largest urban innovation center. We have 1.5 million square feet in downtown Toronto that is focused on helping Canadian firms start, grow, and then scale internationally. We have about 1,200 ventures in our family that we're working with, and I'm pleased and humbled to lead the Finance and Commerce Group, which has about 411 of those firms. And it's a very exciting place to be. Lots of focus on artificial intelligence, lots of focus on blockchain and big data and all kinds of analytics. Wealth management and other financial services as well are in our space. So it's an exciting time to be in the business of innovation.
Kelly Fry, Program Manager, Barclays, NYC, Techstars. I love Techstars, it's like,
Yeah, I think we have the longest accelerator name, Barclays Accelerator, powered by Techstars in New York. So I'm Kelly Fry, I'm the program manager, which essentially means I'm the COO of our accelerator. We're actually based right upstairs on the 6th floor of Rise and focus on FinTech companies specifically. So Techstars is the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. We do that by giving access to a variety of resources, talent, capital, mentorship. And my role really involves sourcing and recruiting our companies, our mentors, and investors to come in and help our companies to scale over the course of our 3-month accelerator program.
And then all the way south, I guess that's the right direction there, Jane Barratt, the founder and CEO of Goldbean.
Thank you, David. So Goldbean is an entry-level investing platform. We license content and software into financial institutions, into banks and credit unions. Our goal, similar to Wealthsimple, is to get people started investing. We're not wealth managers, we're all about financial health and getting people to reprioritize spending into growing their money. I am originally not from New York, you may not have heard it, but I am Australian, I'm married to a Canadian, so I'm very conflicted, but I'm based in this space, right? And I'm extremely happy to be here, so thanks for including me there.
And I'm actually just very delighted that all those folks are here. So let's kick it off. And remember, any questions, feel free to make yourself known. So first, let's start off with the 2 organizations that help foster these things in the respective cities. So to Jeff and then Kelly, just maybe use a few minutes about kind of what it is that your organizations do to make it easier for folks like Dave and Jane to be successful.
Sure. So we try. And we try. And what we try to do, as Kelly mentioned before, we try to provide advice to companies that are at various stages to help them through their everyday business challenges. We try to connect them to capital, both Canadian and international. We're also involved in helping them connect to corporate partners for business connections and relationships. A lot of Canadian firms are actually not providing total solutions right to end users, so they are looking to sell services on to B2B clients, banks, etc. We have started working in the talent space as well. Talent is a key, let's face it, capital, customer connections and talent are the biggest challenges that most startup firms have, and so we're trying to reduce friction as it relates to all of those things. And a big focus for us, our firm has been in existence for 10 years now, actually I guess 11, we're in a new year now. So 11 years. And so we're a little bit of the gray hair in this space of helping companies grow and be successful. One of the areas that we're really focused on now as well is helping Canadian firms connect to the international market and be able to reduce friction for firms to cross borders and deliver in markets outside of Canada. So that's been a big focus for us recently. But we offer a complete suite of services. We have courses that entrepreneurs can attend to learn about marketing, to learn about creating business plans, to learn about getting financing, right up to direct one-on-one coaching with experts in different industries. We service mainly people in Toronto, mainly people in Ontario, but over 10 million people worldwide have actually accessed our services online to take courses and participate in the MARS program.
For Techstars, we always say that we focus on idea all the way to IPO. So from the idea stage, we have Startup Weekend and Startup Week, which some of you may be familiar with, for those who are just looking to launch into entrepreneurship and kind of do it in a condensed way of, okay, I have this idea, but I'm not quite sure. Let me test the waters and see how it goes. And then on the complete other end of the spectrum, we also have Techstars Ventures, which invests in later stage companies, so Series A and beyond for Techstars portfolio companies, those who've gone through the accelerator programs, but also those who haven't and are just interesting investments from a later stage perspective. And then in the middle, we have what we're probably most known for, which is our accelerator program. So we have 40 accelerator programs around the world right now, 2 in New York right now, and 1 in Toronto, a couple more coming to Canada soon. And those are all 13-week programs where companies apply and 10 companies are selected per year. The first month really focuses heavily on mentorship, so surrounding you with 100+ industry experts, in my case, FinTech industry experts, who can help point your arrow in the right direction as a company, so to speak. The second month is then focused on more of the execution and growth. So now that the arrow is pointed in the right direction, how do you focus on product market fit and traction and starting to test with pilot customers? And then month 3 is focused heavily on the fundraising strategy, putting you in front of VCs and how do you convey that right message so that investors are attracted and want to help you raise your round. So those are the variety of ways. Techstars really focuses heavily on surrounding you with a network that can give you access to those resources and those people that you wouldn't otherwise. And for us in particular, it's just heavily focused on FinTech. We look at FinTech very, very broadly, from true capital markets plays to banking to impact investing, and even this year we had an HR tech company that focused on VCs and bank as clients. So really wide perspective in FinTech, but New York's been a great home to us in terms of getting access to the right people for our companies.
So that's a good point to jump into. We're both, Jane and Dave. You start off in different ways in your respective cities. So just give us a sense of kind of what you went through and what resources you tapped into to get going. And let's start over with Dave.
Yeah, we launched in 2014. There's a lot of kind of government funding programs in Canada to help startups kind of grow and scale. So there's a program called Shred Credits. There's other ones that, if you raise a certain amount of money, they'll match you up to a certain amount if you're funding for any sort of research and development. So we use some of those programs. We actually tapped the US to bring 2 of the 4 of us who founded the company up to Canada to get it going.
So you got talent from here?
We got two people from the West Coast, actually, not from New York. So we won't say it's from New York. We were fortunate. We raised money from all private high net worth investors at the beginning. And I think the key for us was to find that lead investor who kind of personified our product. So we ended up raising money in relative short order once we were able to convince that first lead investor. It took us a while to find that first lead investor, but once it happened, everything kind of domino effect from there. And then for us, when we raised our Series A, we kind of looked at traditional VC. In Canada, we raised a $30 million Series A. There's not a ton of VC money that would do a $30 million raise. So we looked at traditional VC, we looked at the banks, and we actually selected Power Financial, which is kind of an insurance conglomerate based in Canada, but has very much a global presence. In the US, you would probably be most familiar with Great-West Life. So it's their parent, family controlled out of Montreal. And the reason why we chose them was that unlike a traditional VC who needs liquidity in a set time frame, the family kind of looks out generations. And so, there's no secret that the robo space, you're betting on the future of your clients. It's not a venture that's profitable day one. And so you need to have patient capital. And so that was one of the big things for us. And obviously, Canada is a great place to start, but it's a relatively small place in the global perspective. And so we also wanted to go outside of Canada in relative short order. And Power had the resources for us in the US, in Europe, in Asia. So we selected the US obviously as the closest kind of neighbor to us to kind of launch and subsequently launched in the UK.
So you had a big enough, a big time investor in other words, that had contacts, they almost served as a conduit to get to different markets?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly were able to tap into their expertise in all the markets. Like what were the pitfalls, positives, negatives of the various countries that we had options to go to. Because 2 of the 4 of the founders are from the US, it was logical to come here. Anyone who's familiar with Wealthsimple, we spent a lot of time, money, and resources investing in our brand and our content. And so New York for us was a great place to attract talent in that particular area. And so the office that we have here in New York is solely based around kind of marketing and brand.
Well, Jane, I know you're an earlier stage in that, so, and probably went through a different process to get where you are, so.
I mean, everything sounds tidy in hindsight, but at the beginning, it's a struggle. New York is amazing for many, many things, and I think the network here is unparalleled. If you want someone with expertise in like the nichest of the nichiest thing, you can find them here. And from an advisor perspective, like there's a lot of people in giant, amazing jobs with big brains and big salaries that are kind of bored. So you can get access to a lot of people who are willing to help as advisors. And that network for me early was invaluable, was being able to leverage both the passion and the insights of Wall Street, as well as data people, as well as branding people, design people. So that human capital here was absolutely critical. The actual capital piece, it's funny, founders in New York actually talk wistfully about investors from the West Coast versus New York, in that West Coast investors see New York VCs as very risk averse because most of them are ex-Wall Street. So it's funny to hear people talking wistfully about New York investors because as someone in the investment space, pitching to an ex-Wall Streeter is not fun. It's really not fun. It's like about the worst thing ever. So having at least access, and we eventually, our lead investor is AXA Insurance, like they've been amazing for us. They're on board, they're great for contacts. We have, like Wealthsimple, a number of high net worth individuals and family offices, but the traditional VC route in New York was awful. Like it genuinely was like a giant time sink. And when I look down all of our list of investors, there's only a few that were new to us. Most of them were from the network. And I think that is probably lesson number one of starting a company in New York. You want a very deep and wide network of people to be able to tap, because the traditional route that everyone says is you can start a company in New York, is all the resources in here, all the talents here, it's still really hard. I get very jealous when I hear of things like shred credits, because literally none of that exists. Like there are no incentives from a financial perspective to build your business in New York City. And that's, it's kind of part of the competitive nature of the city. But I think the third thing that not many people talk about in terms of like access as a startup in New York, there is so much going on. There's startup competitions and incubators and accelerators and corporate VC programs that want you to come in, and there's events every other night, if not every night. And there are so many distractions, and I'm actually deliberately using the word distractions, that for a founder, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And you see people come into the scene and they spread themselves so thin that 6 months later, they're gone. And it's an upside when you can leverage the network and leverage the events and understand what is your purpose to go out and do something versus get caught up in it. And I've lived in New York for almost 14 years now. I do love it deeply. It was never a question that I would start a business here, but it definitely comes with downsides alongside the upsides.
Any thoughts on your side, just from what Jane said, just comparisons?
Yeah, I mean, Canada's known to be the friendly neighbor. And
That's so mean.
to be honest with you, I mean, the tech community in Toronto is very, very friendly. Everyone is wanting to help each other. Even the private investors of the VCs. I mean, I would say that they're nothing like what you hear of the West Coast VCs or the New York VCs. We're getting more and more capital as you start to see some substantial exits, in Canada, and so you're seeing that kind of getting reinvested into the kind of system. I mean, Shopify obviously has been a huge success in Canada, and you're starting to see, a lot of your employees there start to sprinkle around and invest back into other startups, both with money but also with time. So I mean, we've got events probably every night too. One of the guys at Wealthsimple started a monthly event called TechTO, and there's like 800 people that come out every single month. Yeah, and they pay $20 a ticket, and it's to hear 5 pitches and to network. They get a free beer and pizza. But and now they've taken that to every major city in Canada. So I think that the stereotype of Canadians certainly rings true, even in the tech community.
Jane, anybody else? I mean, just the niceness of it. I mean, that's
It depends. Like the FinTech community in New York is not giant, and it is actually very strong and very collaborative. And like I'm a subset of the subset of FinTech in that there's like 10 women in FinTech in New York, and we all know each other very well. So it is helpful. It is collaborative, but it takes a while to find that tribe. And I think that's the, it's not like you can go out to some New York Tech Day event and you're alongside literally 2,000 other startups. Everyone makes that mistake once. And so
the mistake of going to a place where you're lost.
Well, it's just, there's no value to it. It's, when you look at, this is going to sound like a giant blanket statement, but as a founder, we're often just the entertainment. Like we are the unpaid entertainment to sell tickets to an event. And to have, thank you for sponsoring, so
I'm really feeling guilty.
No, it's not, but like, this is a purposeful conversation, and it's in my office, so it's really convenient.
She's negative the essence, so I appreciate that.
No, I mean, New York is it's a tough town. It's a very competitive town, and to have, you have to earn the collaboration. It's not like what I'm hearing from Toronto, where everyone is welcomed and everyone helps everyone.
I think to Jane's point, it's a little bit, it becomes a healthy paranoia, if you will, in New York. Where some of it's a numbers game. There's just so many of everything, so many founders, so many VCs, so many corporates that want to work with startups, that if you're if you're a challenger bank and you know of at least 12 other challenger banks in the city and you see them every other week at different events, yeah, you start to get a little bit nervous of like, okay, how much do they know about my company and what we're doing with our product? And you collaborate, but you also get a little bit nervous, I think, when similar companies get a little too close for comfort, just based off of the numbers.
Yeah, I actually add to this. So I guess we're part of the distraction, and we host some 2,000 events a year in the facility.
But you give away space.
It's nice space. And they're all very nice events with nice people. So there really is, I think, a more of a collegial environment in Canada. Certainly from a VC perspective, one of the things that I find very interesting is a number of them want to hold just general office hours and just talk to people, whether they invest in them, they don't invest in them, just provide their 2 cents of free advice to ventures that are coming along. And there's a lot of relationships that are happening. We have 1,200 ventures just in Mars, and there's in the
Is that mostly Ontario or Canada, or is it all over the place?
mostly Toronto, Waterloo area, but a little bit sprinkling out from there. And there's 40 other companies in the GTA region who are involved in helping entrepreneurs by some definition. We're the largest, but there's lots of different organizations that will help on a more of a niche basis. But I do think that it's not that the Canadians are not competitive. They are competitive, but they are willing to certainly share and be helpful. There's lots of empathy that goes on. I think we have a few more female founders, I'll say. Big fans of that. But it is a more collegial environment, and not just, I think, not just among the ventures, but also amongst the investing community and the other members. The corporates, they can be a little competitive.
Yeah.
As you know, every once in a while, not so
It's
willing
startups
to share.
versus the corporates. I
Yeah,
mean, we've been
Definitely
trying.
the way it feels.
We've been trying to bridge that gap because obviously in Canada, there's 5-6 major banks and 3 major insurance companies, one which is our investor, and so I think a lot of fintechs, what all of the banks and insurance companies have is distribution and access to clients.
Yeah.
Biggest challenge for the startup, and so I think you've seen a lot of attempts of collaboration, and I think the banks are starting to become more open to it. I would say the biggest thing that I've learned is that if you go outside of Canada, everyone within Canada starts rooting for you because there's so few Canadian companies that have actually scaled globally. And so even if VCs who you might have not worked with will start to kind of cheer you on as you take on the rest of the world, so to speak, which I think is a thing that's happened certainly in the last 5 years. It's become a bigger thing of Canadian countries going outside and keeping their roots in Canada. I think that's been a big thing that we've seen more and more, is not kind of moving headquarters outside of Canada, but keeping it there, obviously having offices there, because we've got University of Waterloo, U of T, I mean, we've got a great access to software developers. And from a cost perspective, they're going up in price, but relative to what you're going to pay for one in...
There's a graph there that shows
Oh,
what
really?
it costs. I don't know what the next one is. Is that Italy?
What's that? That's right, Deb.
That,
that the
that bar
salary?
chart that shows Canada is the cheapest, like a third the cost of the US.
Yeah, I mean, but keep in mind though, I
Is
mean,
there a
like,
government subsidy there?
there is something around like, when you bring an employee in Canada, like our tax rates are obviously higher. So there's give and take certainly.
Our health costs are low.
Our health costs are lower.
Yeah.
It's all relative.
We're jealous.
The political environment has certainly helped. We've actually seen a lot of Canadians come back.
Your PM's got better hair.
Yeah. We've seen a lot of Canadians, certainly from the Valley, actually move back to Toronto. There's a whole bunch of organizations that help kind of facilitate that. So if
Like
you...
repatriating entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so they, after university, they'll go down and work at Google, Facebook, whoever. And we've actually hired a lot from Amazon in Seattle, where they are looking to start a family, and they say, enough with this, I want to move home. And, yes, all those companies are in Toronto as well, but they're looking for kind of the next run of startups that are kind of coming up. And so we've had a lot of success with recruitment back from the US.
It's kind of a microcosm of what we see in the city. People start off working in like American Express or River City, and then they want to start a family to go work for MasterCard. So
Who would do that?
Anyway, so you touched on a topic. Before this started, we were chatting, and I was chatting with Jeff, and Jane mentioned it when she said there are 10 women running companies here, and Dave kind of back to that. So that's a hot topic these days, kind of the bro culture. It's all, post Travis and Uber and Harvey Weinstein. Is there a significant difference? Jeff was saying maybe there is. Any comments on that? Because there's only either one of you. Jane said there's like 10 women that drive
Okay, I was
vehicles.
being mildly, it's a little bit of hyperbole, you know. Exactly, it was actually.
Howard in Toronto. Certainly, I think that there's a huge push right now. There's an organization in Toronto called Move the Dial, which is basically trying to get companies and executives to kind of sponsor and mentor younger women to kind of get them up into leadership positions. I mean, certainly at Wealthsimple, we have spent a lot of time kind of understanding how we become a more inclusive company. So we have like ladies of Wealthsimple that every single month there's some sort of an event, whether it's learning to code for the non-software developers to personal finance for the software developers who don't know anything about personal finance when they come to Wealthsimple. You know, like we have a better like maternity leave program in Canada where you get 12 months off when you have a child. At Wealthsimple, we actually pay for mat leave or pat leave for 6 months, full pay. So we're doing things to encourage more women to come join us. Ironically, we've had 3 males take paternity leave and no females yet. So we've got kind of the females that we have at Wealthsimple are either kind of they've already had their kids or they're still.
We've got an audience question.
But what are the stats in terms of funding women in Canada, in terms of startups? And because I can tell you in the United States, they're pretty horrible. So what are the stats? And, I mean, I love what you're doing in your company. That's all wonderful. But what we really want to know are what are the stats in terms of the funding of females in startups?
Female or co, right? The stats on both are terrific. Female founder or joint teams that have co-founders that
So I'm going to say it's not great because at the end of the day, I think about 20% of our firms, Michelle, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but I think 20% of our firms are female founded or have a female founder in them.
I would say it's around that.
So maybe 18 to 20%. And so the funding, but there's still a funding gap. There's no question. There's a funding gap both in the number of female entrepreneurs who are A, choosing to be an entrepreneur and then B, moving forward with the business. And there is a funding gap in terms of the amount of funding that they're getting. I think there's a whole variety of reasons for that. And I think that we've got a lot of work to do, but I think that we're starting to make some great strides on that work. When we were talking earlier about the grow culture, is that what?
Well, and that's kind of the au courant term, right?
Yeah. I find that interesting because I'll say that as a male of almost 50 years, it's not something I've experienced while living in Toronto. Really, this concept of locker room talk or whatever it is has not been part of my existence. And I have played on lots of sports teams and been in lots of locker rooms. I have had that experience, by the way, when I worked here in New York, and I have had that experience while I worked in California. But in Toronto, I haven't. And I'd go so far as to say that I worked for a global bank, and my boss at the global bank was female, and she was the head of all retail banking operations for 55 countries. And her boss was a female, and who was the head of banking for 55 countries. A company whose chief technology officer was also female, and the chief administrative officer was also female for an international bank. So this is.
But what I'm really just asking was, what was I've worked in financial services for over 30 years, and I've been a golden head, and
yeah.
I get all that. I got that. But I really just wanted to know was, what was the percentage of women that were founders, and what was the landscape like in terms of their ability to get funded? And you answered that question.
Yeah, so it's about
and
18.
It seems to be a little bit better than the United States, but it's still not very good. So
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think in general, and thinking specifically about that, we might have even thought about the mix of the panel, but another question here. I thought this would be a good topic when it came up.
I'd be curious the same question of Barclays, because you've got incubators around the world. Have you done any research on your accelerator programs and women founders in your accelerator programs in different countries? How many are applying? How many are getting in? Anything like that?
Yeah, so from a Techstars side, I can't speak necessarily from Barclays' perspective. For our accelerator here, our last cohort that we just had 30% female CEOs, 50% female co-founders. So we were really excited with our stats this past cohort. In terms of the company as a whole, I'd have to get back to you on the exact numbers, but.
I'm curious, but to get your class of 30% CEOs and 30% founder, whatever
Yeah.
the two statistics you just said, which are wonderful and very high, I'm just curious, did you actually have to give them the benefit of the doubt? Did you have, if you look at your application pool percentages
Yeah.
to your acceptance pool percentages, were they similar, or are you going to have a gentleman who said, hey, I'm the white guy who was actually discriminated against
Yeah.
in favor of getting more women?
So we actually found that once we went from a general application to our top 40% that went on to final interviews, that they were 40% more likely to have a diverse team. And that's across the board, so that's not female specifically. But so for us, that was something very, very important to myself and John Zanoff, who's our managing director, that we are partnering with different outreach and community organizations that are focused on diverse founders, that we're talking to VCs that know of early stage startups that we should be considering for our program. The other big piece for us too was, okay, once we get these amazing female founders in our doors, how do we make sure that they're also being surrounded with the mentors and the network that they need as well. So representation within our mentor pool was also very, very important as we were considering kind of planning out the accelerator program.
Can I say something as a founder?
Yeah, no, who's the founder? She's actually a
So the stat, just in case, it's 2.9% of all venture funds go to female-founded companies. It's
US.
US,
horrible. Yes,
2017.
2.9%, and it's like 0.03% go to women of color. Like, it is absolutely horrific. And so and sorry to throw some shade, but your answer, you gave your personal experience. So because I've worked for women, I'm a good guy, and I'm sure you are a good guy, but
I only
it's,
have my
I
personal.
know, but it doesn't really help on the overarching issue, which is, I can say my personal experience. I've run $100 million companies, and I walk into FinTech conferences, and people think I'm a waitress.
Yeah.
It's fucking offensive.
I know.
Yeah.
Right? So that, and still, excuse me, honey. Someone said, excuse me, honey, I'm really tired. Where could I take a nap? I'm like, what the fuck century is this? God. Anyway, but from the problem with even like the Techstars example is there are so many women, like women start companies at 4 times the rate of men, right?
Really?
And, yeah, it's insane. But what we're considered, it's a lifestyle thing. Like somehow we're still branded with you're not ambitious and it's not going to scale and it's not worthy of venture and it's not really a startup and you can do it from your house and look after your kids. And I think until that systemic bias changes, all of this is just tough.
Yeah. And also speaking as a founder too, in the FinTech space.
This is
there are, and it's great to hear that Barclays, for instance, has upped the percentage of your diverse teams. But the reality is that these accelerators in the city really only accept you once you've shown traction. And I know that, oh, you're great.
Your idea was great, but
And so you've got to get that funding to go from, we're almost product ready, to go, but we can't get accepted into it because we don't have traction yet. And so there's issues with funding at all different phases for women, for everybody, but it's particularly.
I have many female founder friends that said their lead investor is MasterCard.
Yeah, there was just
I use their credit card.
there was just a study that came out.
Their credit card.
Seed funding for women, female founders, is only 6% in 2017. So that's really where you need your money before you even get accepted into a Barclays type.
So I think a real conclusion of this is that there's certainly a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of it. That kind of makes me think of one other point: is to what extent are governments or cities or whatever your jurisdiction encouraging this? Because these things need to know they don't change themselves. And that's a broader question: to what extent do they get involved in the startup world? So we've got to get a sense of what Ontario does versus what New York does. I mean, Jane alluded a little bit earlier, but somebody back there has a comment.
No, that's actually what I was looking to ask was Canada appears to be double the numbers in the US, so what are you doing
I don't know.
We're about 10%.
You know, I think generally speaking, Canada has been at least known to be more inclusive, like not just like specifically in business, but just broadly speaking, more accepting of, you know, different races, different, you know, sexuality, like all that kind of stuff. So I think it has moved into the tech space, but I would still say that it's still not good. And I would say that at every event, there's still that conversation, and until that conversation doesn't need to be had as something unique, like we still have a problem ourselves in Canada. But I would say that broadly speaking, if I just looked at the two countries, that it's a different social setting.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a different social construct. I do know that the whole idea of getting women into tech is starting at the schools. The school boards at grade schools are pushing it. They're pushing it at high schools. Universities are actively encouraging women to come into the STEM programs by whatever definition that is. A number of funds are setting up female-focused funds to do seed funding and to do early stage funding. So there's a number of activities that are happening to try and bridge some of these gaps specifically that are happening, and they're happening at really all levels. So it's I do think that there's maybe a fundamental cultural difference as well. We're not, again, as I said from the very beginning, there's still lots of work to do, and clearly there's space here. People are stepping up with money, people are stepping up with actions. The government's part of it, and private capital is also part of it. So we expect to see continuous improvement in this space. We are seeing, you know, the idea of doing an event like this and you know, having all men
That's becoming less and less frequent.
Is definitely less and less frequent. In fact, we're running a conference that would be all women on stage for the entire event, and it's not going to be something about, you know, it's not to be an event that talks about the discrepancy. It's all the same content. It's just being delivered by women who are perfectly competent, perfectly capable, and should be there. And we can do an entire event around that in Toronto, and we're going to. I do think that there's sort of a cultural underpinning, but absolutely the need to set aside funding and set aside funding mandates and actual entire funds targeting this space is part of the mix, and we're seeing that come online pretty seriously this year and next year.
Yeah, and David mentioned shred credits earlier, where, and I'm not sure what's it, 40% of your development costs can be claimed. Like, there is nothing. Oh, it's you, I'm sorry. It's young.
It's between 33 and 65%, depending on the way you are incorporated in Canada. So if you're a CCPC, which is a Canadian controlled private corporation, you can get up to 65% in refundable tax credits. Basically, the government is sending you a check.
Yeah, like that's a big deal.
Now, is there anything at all comparable that goes on?
I mean, I find most of the government programs here are things like the Partnership Fund for New York City, which, you know, they're at every event and they're talking about their programs, but if you write 10 checks a year and there's 10,000 companies getting set up a year, you're a very small percent of companies that are impacted by that.
Do you have any idea what number? Are we doing the temperature? Is it too cold, too warm?
Hot.
Okay, we're giving it 2 more. Okay, so do you have any idea how many firms actually take advantage of this? Just curiosity. Is it 10?
No. It's pretty much every company that does research and development in Canada.
Everyone knows about it. Like, it's not a
Everyone
secret in
knows.
Canada, and there's actually consultants that will help you write the pitch. So if you're a startup anywhere in Canada, like, you're very aware of all the government programs, and you're most likely applying for it. I don't know the percentage of who gets money.
I was just thinking that Jay made the comment of the number of checks. So I don't know, if you're starting up here in the States, New York specifically, is there anything analogous to that?
Nothing. No, it's a giant competition for checks out of, like, you know, corporate accelerators or the Techstars of the world. But like Techstars, you get 1,000 applicants for what, 15 spots?
Yeah.
10 spots. You know, it's a lottery every time, and like the way that I usually say no to most of the invitations I get, simply because like 1,000 founders spending a day or two on an application is basically 3 years of full-time equivalent work that someone somewhere is paying for to be able to have a showcase of 10 people. And it's just like distractions, and it's just not worth it from a lottery perspective. Like you got to, and same with VCs, you got to play the numbers. If a VC writes one check for every 600 companies they meet, which is about the ratio for traditional VCs, like for a founder, there's honestly very little chance that you're going to get a VC check from a cold introduction.
I'd also make a comment, and this might be controversial.
There's a question there.
Oh, just on this last point. I think one of the challenges, I'm a millennial male. I've been brought up in I think a different culture where I don't think millennials see as much difference between men and women. I think they're like.
But you can tell.
You were not millennial.
I just think that the VC community is still very old school in their thought process. And I think there needs to be more, I mean, it's harder obviously to be a younger VC if you don't have the money. But, I think it is something that, if you got more kind of younger people into the VC space, I would hope to think that there wouldn't be as vast different opinions, but that would be, I personally
That's
think
time. That takes time.
that takes time.
There's a question back here.
I had one point and then I had one question. I wanted to respond to this topic here, and I think that the answer...
Resonate a little bit or project?
Sorry, yeah, I had one point to make and one question to ask. But regarding this point, this topic here, I think, Kelly, your point is exactly spot on. That is the answer to how we're going to kind of balance the scales, right? In that, it's not about lowering the bar. So my name is Mike Davis. I'm the co-founder and chief investment officer of Empower Financing. So we're a FinTech company, and we do marketplace lending. What this translates to is that we spend the bulk of our time in front of investors. And I'll tell you, there's no group of people that have higher EQ than, frankly, women. And I love the fact that at Empower, we're at parity, not only at the exec level, but across the entire company. And we didn't achieve that by lowering the bar of HR, right? The talent bar is still the same for men or women. What we did do was we changed where we were sourcing from, right? Where there are incredibly high potential, very talented women that traditional paths of recruiting don't access, right? And so we've been a direct beneficiary of that. I think secondary, the point this lady made over here in the corner, I think is also pretty spot on in that, again, the answer is right here in the room. It does take a lot of money to be a VC. Some of us are serial entrepreneurs and might, play in the angel end of the bracket, but, everybody here can be an advisor, right? And so one of the things that you do is same solution, just different problem, right? Go upstream, talk to your accelerators, right? We have several accelerators that have invested in us. Talk to them. They do a great job of sourcing female founder startups, and just offer to advise. And slowly, if each of us did that, right, we would shift the odds of how many female founded startups actually get funded, right? It's an incredible, powerful kind of thing that we are in control of. I don't like defeatist mentalities. I'm not saying this is what I'm hearing, but the idea of power is right here. To your point, we are all millennials. I mean, a little bit older, but
well, okay, maybe not all of us.
Millennials. To your point about millennials is spot on. But the idea here is that we can be the change that we want to represent, right, in the larger ecosystem. It doesn't have to be that way. I am also a New Yorker, so I'm going to transition over to my question. Is that okay?
You may ask a question.
Thanks. Thanks for the clap. All right, so my question, I wanted to go back to sort of this idea of this healthy dose of paranoia. I too approach panel invitations, in fact, accelerator invitations, also with a very healthy amount of paranoia.
Thank you for showing up.
Yeah, like why are you interested in having me attend exactly, right? Because my time is valuable. There are other things I could be occupying my time with. But I think that the answer here is, or I would like to know what the Canadian equivalent is. So we are also exploring Canada as sort of the next push for our business. We have explored Mexico City for our Latin clients, but we are considering Canada given the political environment here in the U.S. And I'm really kind of curious about this like family approach. We look at our investors as an investor family, and it's a referral mechanism that has allowed us to not only get our lead investor in our seed round, but also our lead investor in our A round, New York based. But we would love to see how that would translate to something in Canada, right? Can you comment on sort of ecosystems that are out there that we should tap into?
That's a pitch to you, I think.
I think it's a direct
Monday.
message. You want me to then?
Canada. We will let you answer, it's all right. I think that if I understand the question, I think it's the Canadian VC market is a smaller market, it's a tighter market. So there's a bit of a higher risk of, you don't want to mess up with one because your experience with one will get around to all of the other ones faster than you can.
It's true here too, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really small community up there. So that's a key part of it. The VC community, I think that it's also they're less quick to invest. I think it's the average of somewhere around 8 months of working with.
They're much more conservative.
Yeah. So they kind of want to get to know you a little bit better. They kind of want to understand your firm. They want to understand where you're going. They want to understand you as founders and sort of have that relationship. So that's a process and it takes time. And so at the end of the day, what you really got to do is get out, meet some of them, and start that dialogue because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a dialogue and a conversation over time. What I have also found with them in general, and my personal experience, is that they tend to be pretty helpful as well. So if you're talking to one and they either don't have investable capital right now or you're not quite right for their portfolio, they're pretty quick to recommend you to somebody else. If they think that you're reasonable. I think a really good sign that you have a problem with the pitch is if they're not recommending you to somebody else. But if you're in the space, they'll give you a warm handoff to somebody else who's got capital and is looking for somebody in the space that you're looking for. But it's really, you got to make some friends and start having some conversation because it's definitely a process from a dialogue perspective.
I'll just add, nothing to do with the VC side, but if you are going to come to Canada, our regulatory environment is very different. We have provincial or state regulators. We don't have an overarching regulator. And so depending on where you set up shop, it's a little bit of a challenge. There's a fight for control and power on which regulator is going to be kind of the leading edge. And I would say that Ontario specifically has come a long way in 3 or 4 years. They've created like a sandbox approach, similar to what UK did a while ago. And so that is a way to accelerate getting registered and playing in that space. When we went through the process, it took us 8 months, and they kind of look at you, they want to know everything before you start. Where in the US, our experience was anyone can come and start up a business and get it going, and then they're going to come in a year in. It's the opposite in Canada. Like you're on the stand for a solid time. So if you are coming to Canada, certainly it's called OSC Launchpad. Would be my recommendation to go through that channel. And they're kind of geared to make decisions somewhat faster than just going through the OSC normally.
And there's been a number of firms through that, even though it's a relatively new process. So there's good experience, and they're actively, I will say they're following a bit of a continuous improvement path. They're really trying to find ways to make that smarter, better, faster over time.
Pat Chalkis is her name.
Probably just to get the acronym right, OSC is the Ontario Securities
Sorry,
Commission.
yeah.
So that's your regulator.
So Pat leads the group, and she's been fantastic. And that would be who you want to reach out to.
I follow as a corporate maker, but I follow on my duties. Typically, if someone uses an acronym without explaining it first, I penalize them.
Oh,
Anyway, question back here.
Thank you, David. Maybe a two-part question, but both focused on the Canada part of this. Maybe part of it's a cross-border.
We're mostly Yanks here, right?
So the first part, yeah, but if you're in Ontario sponsored, so we did. So the first part is, when we talk about Ontario, how much of that is Toronto and how much of that is setting up business in Waterloo, London, Kingston, Ottawa? How concentrated is the sort of market for tech talent? And part two, and this is the cross-border part, my understanding is that there is no such thing as an LLC structure equivalent in Canada, yet arguably that's a much better structure for a startup than a C Corp. So I was wondering if there's any, maybe I'm wrong with that, but if it doesn't exist, are you aware of any discussions at the government level about permitting that sort of legal entity to exist?
Let's go first.
I actually don't have an answer on number two.
I don't have an answer on that either.
Yeah, do you want to go on the?
Well, let me just reflect on maybe that'll help. So I know, we all know, most of us all know what an LLC or C corporation, one is incorporated, one's limited liability partnership. So what are the advantages that you would see for one over the other?
LLC is a much better structure for a corporation, but most VCs insist on C Corps because it's easier for them.
No, legally you can't raise money in an LLC. You can't give shareholders up.
You absolutely can. You absolutely can.
Well, it's much more
But
complicated.
it's more complicated than the C Corp. But basically, the reason an LLC is better are really two reasons. Number one, during a period when a company is incurring losses, which is common for the early stage of a startup, those losses can flow through to benefit the shareholders.
Yes.
Which basically, for a founder, it cuts your cost of capital in half in the early stages.
As an LLC.
As an LLC, the other advantage is that if you were to sell a company, which is most startup exits are sales, not IPOs. If you want to take a company public,
Especially these days.
C Corp or an LP, but most exits are actually sales, and in a sale, all else being equal, you ought to be able to sell the same company for 15 to 20% more because of the ability of buyer and seller to step up the tax basis, take a 338 election, and the PV of that tax shield, which accrues typically the seller.
So there's a taxable benefit for the LLC structure versus C Corp structure.
There's a benefit to the buyer.
To the buyer, yeah, I'm just trying to put it in terms that I could understand. So,
Yeah, we don't have that. Most companies in Canada would be CCPCs, Canadian Controlled Private Corporations.
Is that like a corporate? Is that like a C corp or anything? Is that like a incorporated shareholders?
Yeah, the only kind of nuance to that is in Canada, the seller, when you sell, if you are private for 2 years, you get $800,000 capital gain exemption, tax free.
So another advantage the government gives.
Yeah. If you raise funding from a public entity, though, within that 2 years, you lose that right. So in our case, we lost that right. To your first question, though, I would say obviously, like Toronto is massive, population-wise relative to Ontario. Waterloo's another hotbed, though, for startups. Obviously, with the University of Waterloo being there, certainly most of the talent in Toronto is coming from University of Waterloo. And Ottawa has a decent startup scene because Shopify. That's where Shopify's headquarters is.
I think there's a good concentration in Toronto. The Toronto Waterloo corridor is big concentration. That's where we've got the big schools that have the long history of artificial intelligence and engineering programs.
Christiana, I believe that's a question.
We kind of touched on it, so there's kind of, okay, you've got the VC as, I'm gonna say writing the check, even though I'm in payments, but just for the visual. But you mentioned one with the Regulatory Securities Commission, but are there other infrastructures established that will help companies even to get to the VC point or to grow? And what are those in Ontario?
So there's lots of organizations like ours, which will help on education and help on connections, will help potentially with subsidizing space, and doing that type of stuff for the business. There are a number of different programs that are provided by the government, one of which is a venture program where you can make a proposal and they will match funds up to, I think the last one's up to $1 million, yeah. So there's a few different programs that come in the market like that, and shred credits once you're operating. That seems to be the space.
Thank you.
And I forget the name of the one that you get. In fact, we actually did get it. But basically, if you raise up to $1 million, they'll match that. So it kind of doubles your fundraising.
And is that, as long as I do it, I get the money, or is it some other qualification, or?
There is a qualification process. Again, I don't know what the percentage of acceptance is, but I think it's reasonably good.
So Ontario's sponsoring, so I'm very happy with this. It sounds like a wonderful place to do business. Come on, Kelly and Jane.
We can't find that. We can't find free money.
Why would you be in New York?
So, I mean, the talent here is amazing. And I think David said it as well. I think you get access to people of a quality that is pretty astounding, but also in a very flexible way.
Flexible like?
We've scaled the team, and then we're like, wait, why are we paying all these people full time? Because it's completely legal to use freelancers and contractors. And so you can bring in best of breed. Instead of paying them $175,000 a year, you pay them $25,000 to get something done in a month and send them away. And I think that is an incredibly powerful way to build a business.
Is that harder to do in Canada?
I mean,
Jane says yes.
The U.S. market's 10 times the size, so I would say yes. In our experience on the kind of, we have our marketing and brand and content people, so we also use a lot of contractors in New York. We don't do that in Toronto, but I mean they are available.
And is that because there are restrictions on using contractors, or there's just not as many?
I just don't think there's as many.
I was gonna say, there's something kind of magical about the talent ecosystem here in New York, where it's like, there's just a constant remixing of people, between people moving in, people moving out, university students, people who just want to be in New York, people who are moving here for other jobs. There's just, if you're not able to find the talent that you want this week, wait until next week, because it'll probably have shown up by then. So it makes the hunt for talent very, very nice.
And costs are going up in Toronto to hire talent. There is only a certain amount of people, especially on the software development side, that we've seen increase in costs, especially as Shopify, like the big players, have opened up larger offices in Toronto. Software development salaries are continually increasing, which isn't great, but relatively speaking to the cost of living, it's still better than if we were to hire them all in California or New York.
And then, there's also access to amazing people and amazing companies. You can go to a friend at BlackRock and get access to the person who I want to talk to, Dr. Ron at Jack Henry. Like, there's amazing people in the city that, you can have a cup of coffee with. And I think that is, it's not that they're not in Toronto, there's just
There's so many more.
Especially for FinTech.
One question just occurred to me, it hasn't come up, but Bloomberg had a big push to get Cornell Techstars on here, and I know it's just opened up. Have you guys seen any effect of that yet, or do you anticipate any effect of that? This was setting up a tech-focused university. Cornell was, I think, one was the piece of it. They partnered with Technion out of Israel, and the campus has been open for a while.
the one on Roosevelt.
Yeah, Roosevelt. They were housed in Google office for a while.
It's been open for a while for graduates.
Yeah, I gotta go and look at it, because I went down there when they were up with Google. Have you seen any noticeable effect of that? 'Cause that's kind of part of the whole ecosystem, yeah.
I haven't personally seen any big effect coming from it yet. I anticipate some interesting technologies coming from it, hopefully, in terms of talent, in terms of potential co-founders for the businesses that are here in New York looking for more technology co-founders, which sometimes are not the easiest to find. So hoping to see that, but I haven't seen any big impact yet.
And I mean, it may be because it's early days, but a big part of the ecosystem here is the people who are getting rich are the ones who are selling pickaxes to the miners. So there's a lot of like service providers and infrastructure providers that move in where the money is. And again, as a founder, you're like, oh, just a little bit of that check would have been good. But sure, give it to the next gen.
So give me a specific example, because it's a great metaphor, but give me.
So Rise pitched for it, can I say
Sorry?
that? Sorry, Rise pitched for, running a piece of that campus. Like there is a lot of checks being written to companies like Rise, and Rise do an amazing job of building, like, I guess, an epicenter for FinTech here in the city. But it's all for-profits, if that makes sense. Like Bloomberg is giving money to for-profits to build the ecosystem.
But I think that, in Toronto, we have the University of Toronto, which is the home of Jeffrey Hindle, which is a professor who's been working on artificial intelligence since the 70s, literally. And he's, some people call him the godfather of artificial intelligence. He's with Google now. A number of his students are sprinkled around all the top companies and that type of stuff. They've now created the Vector Institute, which is in our facility. And its purpose is meant to do advanced research as it relates to artificial intelligence. Its purpose is to keep top-level students in Toronto interested in artificial intelligence and working with companies and doing this type of work and then spinning off talent as it relates to artificial intelligence. I would say that in Toronto, we see this ongoing value. Certainly, some of our top people who are in artificial intelligence are at risk to the Google, Facebook, Amazons of the world, and that happens. But even those people are coming back and supporting things like the Vector Institute. So I can absolutely say that the artificial intelligence community that exists in Toronto benefits from the existence of this group. Vector Institute is very new, so we'll see how that carries on. But Jeffrey Hinton's legacy will carry on for quite a while from the University of Toronto. And I also think the same thing. Ethereum is a Canadian invention, and there's a strong group of people involved in blockchain development that exists in Toronto, and we have that legacy. We're working very hard to keep feeding that and keep growing that, and that's heavy lifting every day. But I think that it can work if it's done properly. I'm a little bit leery of as you mentioned, the firms that are selling pickaxes to miners. We certainly do see that, and it is almost like skimming some economics off the top. But we need these organizations and these firms to drive this knowledge, concentrate this knowledge, and accelerate it. Certainly relative to a lot of other countries in the world that are doing a similar job. So, it's a tough call, but I'm pretty happy with what I've seen from a Toronto perspective.
So I just wanted to add a little bit to the Canadian story with respect to talent. And tell the story about Canada's migration program and how it impacts us.
Thank you. I was going to mention that. I thought you brought it up.
So the benefit that Canada brings when you're trying to bring somebody from abroad is that bringing them as a worker, there is no cap. You can bring in as many as you need. Those people, when you come to Canada, they can get permanent residence. After working for 1 year, they qualify to apply for permanent residence. And within 3 years, become citizen. That's a powerful thing when you're talking about skilled labor, real talent that you want to retain, that they have those benefits. What we're hearing from most people when they go to Canada is that they spend time in the United States, want to go to Canada because they have parents, and they want to bring their parents to live with them. That's possible. There's a pathway to do that. You can bring your parents as a software worker, from China. Bring your parents to Canada on a super visa right away. They can reside in Canada for 2 years, and during that process, they can apply for permanent residence and land and become permanent residents of Canada. These are all things that are benefits that come with bringing your talent to Canada. So it's just a brief overview.
Well, that was one thought that occurred to me, given everything that's going up like here versus Canada. Is that, do you see the impact of that on being able to get talent, being able to grow? Talking to the New Yorkers.
I mean, not in the short term. I think if the H-1B market tightens considerably, then yes, because all of a sudden Facebook and Google and anyone who has both the lawyers and the deep pockets will get the best of bites. I mean, they're already getting their fair share, but if that pool diminishes, then...
So that's the pool, that's the spigot, that gets tightened too much, then it will be hard.
Right.
Canada's
The opposite. They're going to suck up all the H-1Bs. It's a great strategy.
Some of that, and then the other piece is just some uncertainty by nationals describing the executive order about what their future holds for the reducing the
Yeah, so it hasn't just been the Canadians returning to Canada, but it's been other nationals that have come to the United States that are experiencing that uncertainty.
So with the Canadians returning, there's also the opportunity for their spouse, if they have a foreign national spouse, to work right away from them on process for that. So it enables you to come back more easily.
Yeah, we've utilized that a bunch for the spouse.
Any other questions? Tabor.
Yeah, I was thinking, back to talent. Toronto, Ottawa, Ricardo, with its smaller pool where people know each other better and it's kind of mobile within that community, versus the kind of the red talent, which doesn't build any loyalty to the company. Which one is in more danger of kind of, you're building knowledge for people, and then it's going to go travel somewhere else? You also have a chance of kind of your intellectual property, either consciously or even unconsciously because you've worked on it, migrating to other companies. Which one has more danger of kind of seepage of your intel prop?
Well, I would say that, you know, the talent might be nicer, but are they loyal? I mean, you know, I don't know about that. I mean, certainly it's because the companies are under increased pressure to provide the work environments that people want.
That's what I was thinking. You've got the more intimate space.
Yeah.
So I think more inadvertent or even vertically linkage because people know each other better, and it's that kind of mobility versus the sort of rented talent. I was wondering which puts more danger.
I mean, I've seen with freelancing, some startups basically employ a method of contract to hire, use it as like a prolonged interview, if you will. Of, okay, let's test this for a few months, see how their work is, see how much passion they end up having for our company. And if it works out great, I'll bring them on full time, and I already know what the quality of their work is. And this is someone who's already invested a significant amount of time with our company for the last few months. So it builds loyalty, I think, in a little bit different sense than the traditional full-time direct hire.
Yeah, I mean, my thinking's come sort of full circle around in that there is no shortage of ideas and intellectual property, but execution's everything. And that, at the end of the day, you build a team that can execute. If you can have great long-term people, great, but you know, you need as a founder to get the right people at the right time, and sometimes it's just not possible to have all the perfect people full-time employed and committed on that. You know, you have to assume in a city like this, and probably Toronto too, that if you get people for 2+ years, you're doing really well. Like, it's a very moment. People's careers they're not that long, they're relatively short, so they're moving quickly.
Yeah, I think there's less rating of talent in Toronto. I think that happened. You might disagree with me, but I think rating of talent, people stealing your rating,
like the Vikings.
It's an accent. Rating. Sorry. But so I think there's a little bit less of that in Toronto. But you make it's a difficult question to answer because you know, let's say you get some more loyalty, but the reality is if you're growing a company, you have, you know, it's not a nice little smooth curve. It's up and down, and you need to release talent, and you need to bring talent on. And let's hope that you're being really successful, and you need to bring talent on. Well, sometimes the talent that you need to do a project isn't the talent you need to keep. And so, you know, I do think that there's some value in having a deeper contracting pool that you can call in for that on-tap talent to do development as a big deal presents itself, or those opportunities that present themselves early in the business space that you need, but you don't necessarily need them ongoing.
Yes, one follow-up. Do you think Canada has got a place for about 800,000 highly talented people in a variety of occupations?
Well, there's a leading
May
question.
shortly need to find a new place to live.
There's plenty of places outside of Toronto with lots of land, but you know, like so I think the answer is it would be tough to fill 800,000 jobs, like good paying jobs. You know, there's no shortage of places to live in Canada. You know, the challenge obviously is most people live in 5 cities, you know, across the whole country and within an hour radius of them, right? So, and Canada is a little bit unique. Like, I'm always amazed when you come to anywhere in the US and you talk to someone and they're never from the place that you're in. Like, it's a lot more fluid here, and people will move for a job in the US. Canada isn't like that as much. It's like, well, I'm from Toronto, I moved to Vancouver. I'm from Vancouver and I moved to Toronto. Like, there's not a lot of people, like if you're from Toronto, there's a lot of people that, you know, they came in from an hour away. So that's tougher. You don't see as many people willing to go to different places. And to the question earlier, you know, is it mostly Toronto, Waterloo specific? I mean, people, it's hard to start a startup in some town.
And one more, and we're getting close to 8, so please.
So the question I have is, how easy or difficult is it to actually calculate these in Toronto?
Could you just rephrase that again, quick?
Sure. So I want to understand how difficult or simple it is to actually incorporate in Toronto if you're not a Canadian citizen. I understand that in order to take advantage of the SHRED program, you have to first be incorporated. I think you have to be a citizen to take advantage of that program. Is that true, or?
Great question.
So I guess the question is, how difficult is it to incorporate REC in Canada?
Right. So the first, I mean, it's not difficult. I mean, there is basically, I mean, you can do that online. There's a website where you can do that. It's one step. A couple of days later, your company's registered. The question on the SHRED, that's a different one, because the maximum support that you would get as a, you know, to take advantage of the SHRED credit, well, you need to be a Canadian-controlled private corporation, so you need to be basically a Canadian resident. You don't need to be a Canadian citizen, but your corporation needs to be a Canadian-controlled private corporation with you residing in Canada. If you are a foreign corporation, well, then you don't take up to the 65%, then it's 40-35. So you still can take advantage of the credit, but at a lower rate, around 35, but at a lower rate than if you were a Canadian-controlled private corporation. So you're still eligible, but again, at a lower rate.
Thank you.
Anything else? Because we're closer to 8, there's probably some alcohol left behind there. No, so there's always a summary question. So I think just over the next 2-3 years, any kind of particular concerns about this technology, startup, or things you're pretty optimistic about over the next 3-5 year horizon? I can think of the U.S., but let's please walk down.
I'll give maybe one excitement and one fear.
Yeah.
You know, the excitement is in Toronto right now, there are a lot of companies that have kind of come out of the first couple of years of the real grind and now taking a look at global expansion. You know, we're getting not only interest from VCs in Canada, but also now in the US coming up and putting money into the scene in Toronto. So I expect to see more Canadian companies actually follow through and aspire to be a global company and not just sell out, which is historically what Canadian companies have done. I think on the fear side, you know, I am concerned our tax rates in Canada for personal continue to go higher. And with our debt levels as a country, it is a very scary thing. And obviously, you know, our top...
We don't pay attention to that. We can tax and get in debt.
Yeah. So our top tax record for people who care to know is 53.5% at $200,000. And so, you know, if those rates continue to go higher, you know, we could have a drain on our talent pool. who, irrespective of how great Canada is, they may just say, you know, the heck with this, I'm going to go somewhere else.
So like in UK, there's 67 countries.
Yeah, so that is a concern that I think a lot of startups feel, and you know, there was a concern during the last election actually around stock options. There was a lot of talk from the Liberal government wanting to tax stock options at your marginal rate versus treating them as capital gains, which is taxed much more effectively. And the startup community actually kind of petitioned and got the Liberal government to back down on that. But most recently, the NDP, which is our most left-wing government, actually just proposed to come back in. So the topic's starting to kind of come back again. And so these are kind of initiatives that really hurt or potentially have a negative effect on startups that are looking to grow in Canada.
Anything to add to that, John?
Completely agree in the conversations about taxation. I think that's top of mind of everybody. Pretty much everywhere in the developed world is always concerned about tax rates. That we're not immune to that, and it's a bit of a moving target for us as we go through election cycles, as it has been for the United States as well. I also agree entirely. I think we're going to see a lot of reduced friction at the border for companies, for people and companies coming into Canada, and also for Canadian companies going out and capital and that type of thing, and very excited about that. I'm very excited about Toronto and its future as we develop our Vector Institute and you know, centers of excellence around artificial intelligence. I'm excited about Sidewalk Labs coming to Toronto with a major and extremely exciting initiative there. And other firms that are also looking to come to the city in part because of that and of their own volition to take advantage of the talent. I'm excited by some of the work the government's doing to increase the number of graduates that are coming out of our schools in specialized STEM engineering programming professions with expertise. I think that's fantastic as well. So in general, I would say that the future is very bright for Canada, Ontario, and Toronto in particular.
I'm excited for the future of FinTech. I think that there's so many interesting technologies happening right now, and that we're on the cusp of a few others across the next 3 to 5 years that I think are really going to create some powerful startups that will come into the FinTech space. I think from a talent perspective, there seems to be this really interesting shift now where I think especially with students coming out of universities or master's degrees really getting bored or turned off of the big tech companies, the Googles, the Amazons, Facebooks, and wanting to go into startups instead. And I think that that's going to create a powerful shift in talent, as well as just in general the quality of startups and the kind of perspectives that will create in terms of the new companies that we see kind of bubble up over the next few years. On, kind of more of the fear, I'm going to say hopeful side, is I think there really are, to the point of diversity and female founders, I think there really are some amazing organizations out there that are trying very hard to give women and people of color access to capital that they don't currently have, and kind of help them pull the cover away from them. That wasn't put there by themselves, and give them access to capital and fundraising in a way that they haven't before. So I'm excited to see hopefully that make a bigger push around the globe over the next few years.
Jane, I was got a bracing comment.
No, nothing but sunshine. No, I am genuinely terrified about the levels of debt on a personal level in this country, corporate debt as well as government debt. Like, it is something that hasn't really been. It's something we all have just gotten used to, but it is unprecedented and terrifying. I do a lot of market commentary, and it is beyond commentary when, basically all the indicators are pointing towards inflation. The market's like, eh. And there is this weird, the market is the economy right now. That is very frightening to me, having lived through downturns in the past. So I do live in everyday fear of what happens the day the easy money goes away. There has been a lot of you know, people looking for places to put their capital, and at some point that does stop, and it will come back again, but it does stop. On the hopeful side, I am, you know, I'm here. I'm a big believer in the U.S. I'm a big believer in human ingenuity. I think the environment of competitiveness is, for the most part, healthy. Again, it means that it's a steeper hill to climb for people who don't look and come from a certain way, but that the fact that, you know, as Kelly said, there is a little more access. The pace and change is slow, but I'm excited to at least be a part of it and be able to help other people and pull them up. But at the end of the day, I think FinTech in particular is has the, and almost going back to the debt comment, FinTech has the ability to really move the needle, right? And I don't think we've even begun to scratch the surface around financial health and painting a picture of the way people could potentially live their lives in a slightly financially healthier way. And that I'm excited about, and that's what gets me out of bed every day.
And on that positive note, I want to thank the panelists for all the time they put in the comments and the wonderful conversation we've had tonight. I want to thank all of you for attending. And I very much want to thank Ontario and the guy with a long title here, Jens, for making this possible. Please stay in touch. You're on the mailing list for NYPAY. We won't spam you. We try to keep these things once a month or so, have an interesting topic. If you've got any ideas, let us know. And mingle, we've got time. I'm not going to get kicked out if you want to have another drink or just a good chat with one of the many great people here. Please do. So, thank you.